My name is Fred Cook, and I drive school bus.
My name is Leanne Murchie, and I'm a school bus driver for TCAPS. It's been a very wonderful experience.
When I first hired in, one of the previous bus drivers told me that this particular job, driving school bus, is the best job on earth. So I immediately took to it, and I have to agree that this is one of the best jobs that anyone can do.
What prompted me in the very beginning, I have a college degree, and she said, "You're in the safest vehicle in the world on the road." So I thought, well, I'm gonna try. Because I would be on the same time schedule as my own children. And when they were off, I was off. When holidays, I was there. So it was the best of both worlds. TCAPS offers jobs elsewhere within the system.
Between routes, I used to, for 12, 13 years, I did lunch duty over at East Middle School, and now I paint.
They're real good about finding people the hours that they need during the course of the day to make the job great. We have Mesa Insurance. The whole district has it. It's awesome. It's the best health insurance. We offer a 401k. There's a sign-on bonus. It's a win-win situation.
The most important thing, I think, coming to work at TCAPS is you understand that you are part of a team. It's a part of a collective. It's not just bus drivers and then versus teachers. It's not that. We all are in this thing called education together.
If a person generally likes kids, this is a perfect job.
So I'm talking to kids all day, and that experience is really heartwarming, and I continue to understand what it means to be a part of the community.
You are an educator. You have a chance to touch children's lives every day. And don't think that you don't. You are such an important part of the wheel of education.
And I'm calling this meeting to order. I'd like to welcome the audience and thank you for coming. Viewers may watch the Board of Education meetings and board committee meetings live on TV 190 or online at tcaps.net/board. Recorded meetings may be viewed on demand at the same address. The committee set aside this time for public comment. Individuals addressing the board shall have the opportunity to speak during public comment and shall be limited to 3 minutes each. Individuals should not make personal attacks unrelated to actions affecting the school system. We strongly encourage common courtesy, constructive feedback. Detailed rules and procedures, including a complaint process, are outlined in Board Policy 0167.3. Do we have any public comment, Megan?
There's no public comment.
Okay. Then we have no public comment, and we'll move into the procedural things. We are at the draft meeting minutes portion of the agenda. Are there any changes to the draft minutes?
So I was not at the last committee meeting, but so I will defer to you as the standing member.
As the sitting standing member.
That's right.
The only change that I see, and this is called being picky, it's under the informational items, which is number 4 on the minutes, a elementary math pilot update. On the second page, 4th line down, when they say math expression versus 30% satisfied with into math, that 30% should probably be 40. When I went back and looked at the data that Jesse prepared, it looked like they should add 2 numbers together and come up with 40.
Okay,
Um,
we'll make that change.
And then hearing no further changes, do we vote or do we just accept?
Just
No,
accept
yeah,
the meeting.
as long as everybody's no objections, we're good to move forward.
Okay. Then next, I'd like to defer to Dr. Van Wagner regarding professional development.
Okay, so we have a couple of different opportunities. We have the League of Innovative Schools, as well as the University of Wisconsin-Madison's MSAN Institute. So the League of Innovative Schools is a group that we joined about 6 months ago. We had the chance, Heidi and I did, to go to see 2 districts in California. Was highly, highly useful, and taking a look at some really neat ideas they had done, especially with STEM labs and technology. Definitely well worth that time. And so this opportunity is in Alabama, between Birmingham and Talladega. So we are excited. Essentially, this is a group of districts across the country that belong to this group, and we go to visit other districts and the work they're doing. While we're in Birmingham, I think it'll be neat to have the opportunity to see some of the, I think of the Edmund Pettus Bridge that is the spot, where you see a lot with Dr. Martin Luther King and John Lewis, and so I'm really interested in that opportunity of seeing some of the Civil Rights District of Birmingham. And then it'll be interesting in kind of seeing an urban, and maybe I get my understandings that Talladega is a little bit more to the rural side. And so it'll be interesting to see some differences between those districts and some of the innovative things they're doing in their districts. So, so we're excited and asking the board for the opportunity for 3 of us as a part of that group to be able to do that. We do get a small reimbursement back from them for our costs, but we haven't gotten full determination on what that'll be yet. And then University of Wisconsin-Madison MSAT Institute. that is also something in your packet. That's a 2-day intensive professional learning opportunity towards growing our understanding of the current research and district practices, looking at racial equity in schools. So again, looking at some of the work that's being done to make sure that our students of different races, ethnicities, that what are the opportunities and the things that we have to make sure that all of our students have the opportunity to achieve. And so we are requesting that we have 2 staff members have the opportunity to be able to go to that and see how that aligns to our strategic plan and what items might we be able to bring back. Again, often in these things, you find little nuggets that'll help towards identifying the operationalizing the components of the strategic plan. So that's all I have for those. Anything else to add, Tiffany?
I would just say that I had a great conversation with the organizer of MSAN, and she really talked about how she's looking at research-based strategies and promising practices, and looking at significant impact on student achievement and a sense of belonging. So that's where we really look at the strategic plan, and I think it's going to be a great alignment of some of the things that we pull out of that.
That's the one at Madison.
Correct. Yes.
What does MSAN actually stand for? I'm not seeing
Minority
it.
Student Achievement.
Oh,
Network.
okay.
Yep.
Minority Student Achievement Network?
Yep.
So it's like a voluntary network of schools nationwide?
So yes, it is, it's an organization that we could, in the future, if we decided to become members of, but they put on a 2-day training, intensive training on different topics. And so some of the topics are student voice and driving the equity conversations and learning. Those are some of the big topics that will be held this year. So this year, we're just going to try and send a couple people out of the Culture and Climate Committee and have those conversations, see what we can bring back to TCAPS.
And it would be yourself and someone else to be designated going on that trip
Correct.
from central office, or do you have any?
Our goal is to have another person from the Culture and Climate Committee.
Probably more closer to staff member as our initial thoughts here, but it's going to depend on who is available.
Okay.
And it's in April, so they won't have to weather snow or anything like that.
Well, you never know.
Still in Midwest in April, no guarantees.
Yeah.
No guarantees.
Wisconsin.
They sound like great opportunities, and I hope you all report back to us briefly on what you learn.
And so, now, do we move that this be placed on the consent calendar?
So essentially,
Yes.
without objection, we would do that.
So I would move to place it on the consent calendar.
Okay.
Concur.
Okay. Do we vote? Or just
No.
let
Don't
it
need
go?
to.
No.
Okay,
Nope.
see that? You deal with these people off the street, you just never know what you're gonna get. Okay, hopefully you have time to go down and see Huntsville.
Yeah,
By the
that would be
way.
nice, huh?
A lot of exciting stuff there in
Yeah.
Alabama. Then next, to do with the district course catalog updates, with Heidi Maltby Skodak.
Yep. We just had 2 updates, and they're related to shared time courses that students had added. And MVHS stands for Michigan Virtual High School, so those 2 courses are virtual, and they're coming from Michigan Virtual High School. And Megan's going to open up the course catalog. I have it directed to the page and highlighted in yellow. Once they are approved through final board, then they will turn to white and be a part of the course catalog. So those are the 2 that are added. You can see that they were added under Up North Virtual on-demand programming that's available to students. Any questions on that?
So
Pretty straightforward.
I haven't been to curriculum committee in a few months, and I'm not sure if this has come up before. But just for the sake of the public and also maybe some newer board members, can you just correct or clarify if I'm wrong? These emerge when students elect to
Yes,
enroll in these virtual classes, and the TCAPS has to say, okay, this meets our standards and so on, and then it gets in the,
Yes, and this is in particular related to our shared time students. So basically at our offsites, so whether it's TC Christian, these are courses they're electing to take. And so we basically can count the FTE for that portion of the class, and then we have them select courses to take out of the catalog. So sometimes students select different courses that aren't already in our course catalog, and those are reviewed and then added in this fashion, what we're doing today. So a lot of times you'll see, depending on when a course is added, updates to the course guide. And it's a standing item because we always have to make sure all our courses are up to date and in the catalog. So every time we have a board curriculum meeting, you'll see that this comes up. Every once in a while, you'll see that there aren't any changes and we move forward, but typically there's either something in an audit or something that we find, you'll see updates happening. So try to keep it as clean as possible with all the updates in it.
Do they periodically get looked at so that you say, we only have this for a certain period of time and then we remove it from the catalog? Or does it stay indefinitely?
It usually stays in the catalog, so it just depends on if a student is actively taking it or not. So a course could appear in our catalog, but no student might not actively be taking it, so they could still be in there.
And a lot of that has to do with just the work it takes to, all the codes that you have to put in for the state and all that for a course. That's a lot of work. Once you take it out, you gotta put it all back in. And so what we do though often is a lot of times the vendors do that themselves. And a lot of times they rename the course. And so we do have to go through that
That's true,
process.
yeah.
That
is true.
happens more often than not.
oh, yeah.
So can you end up with a ton of courses that nobody takes that just sit in your catalog?
You
Yes.
could, yeah, you could have quite a few in there, but most of them are pretty active courses, so.
Yeah, it seems like you don't pre-populate it, you don't
Right.
proactively populate
Right.
it with the entire Michigan virtual.
Yeah, we
You
could.
know,
Yeah, we don't put the whole
Because-
selection.
Instead of just
yeah.
be-
Because
yeah,
we would
they
have to
wait
go
in-
through and
yeah,
create course
yeah.
codes
For
for
every
every one
single one.
section.
Yeah.
Our
Yeah.
people accounting folks
Right.
would not be very happy.
But our students know they can
They
elect
can
those
elect to
and then
select another
they
And
course.
they
submit it.
notify us, and then we go
and
through
then
the
it gets
process
added to
here
us. Yeah.
and add it to the course catalog.
I appreciate the option. I think that sometimes Edgenuity is a little bit, they have good offerings, but they don't have everything.
Right.
Yep.
So I know one of my kids has taken Michigan Virtual Sign Language, for example.
Yeah.
And couldn't get that through Edgenuity, so.
Yeah, and it's hard for us to find a teacher. That's one of those, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of foreign languages, especially the higher level foreign languages and such. We get that a lot, and Michigan Virtual is a really good, it's a statewide public-private partnership that was created about 25 years ago. Michigan Virtual is that provides these to high schools in the state.
We usually get great feedback on Michigan virtual courses too. So kids usually are very pleased with them.
And
Any
is
other
it-
questions?
Any more? No? Is it the board curriculum committee's recommendation to move this forward to the full board for approval?
Yes.
And that'll be on consent?
Yes.
Consent committee
Okay.
at the next board meeting.
Okay.
Okay, and next I'd like to defer to Kristen Perkowski.
Yeah, so much of our strategic plan work and operationalizing it has been clarifying where the work is going to fall and with which teams and which feedback we need from which stakeholders. So Heidi is going to highlight some of the work we've been doing with principals. So we've been meeting with secondary and elementary principals separately to try to get their feedback on portrait of a graduate work. So this is the work that was done, I guess, alongside the strategic plan, right? It was kind of happening
Yeah, it was kind
simultaneously.
of happening in parallel, I would say.
Yeah,
Yep.
so the year before I got here, which was really outlining from a various amount of stakeholders, both in district and out of district, what we want our graduates to look like when they leave our school district. And so we are now working to operationalize that and make sure that those competencies are addressed in the K-12 spectrum. And I'll let Heidi highlight a little bit more of the work that we've been doing with those teams.
Yeah, so if you're new and haven't, in the Portrait of the Graduate, again, hasn't been adopted by the board yet, but it is simply right now a work in progress. And there's quite a few moving pieces, and it's really grounded in the work that what do we want all our students to be able to do when they leave to be productive citizens, right? And the idea about then how do we take that and operationalize it, make sure it's included in curriculum for our students, and we're teaching those skills of problem solving, strong character, resilience, lifelong learning, and so on. And so we started by sending out surveys not only to our principals and our staff members and our parents, but also to community and business members, because we want to make sure that we're developing and identifying characteristics that are going to make our students strong when they leave in the business and industry world as well. And so below each of the characteristics, you'll see some of the identifiers that are under each section. These actually are things that we want students to be able to do. The next step of that, and I'm not going to read all of these to you, there's 3 pages, there's 9 total for us to look at as far as Portrait of the Graduate: problem solving, strong character, resilient, collaborator, team player, critical thinking, lifelong learner, ethical and global citizen, effective communicator, and adaptable. And so so we identified these, right? So we sent them out. We got quite a bit of feedback on just what they thought they should be community-wise and within our own TCAPS community. And our next steps really were to identify what those ICANN statements are within those characteristics. And then also the next step after that is really to figure out how those embed into our working curriculum. So where do they naturally fall, and how do we identify what we want students to know and be able to do at all the different grade levels? So in our last principals meeting, if it's going to click here, in our last principals meeting, we took these characteristics and broke them down, and you'll see principal names at the top of these because they're actually digging down and doing some of the work themselves and in their building leadership teams, and identified, for example, and I highlighted the critical and creative thinker, demonstrates the ability to work interdependently with a group to promote learning, increase productivity, and achieve common goals. And then the question to them is, what do those ICANN statements or statements look like that we want students to be able to do? So throughout the team, middle school, elementary, high school, they're actually digging into the characteristics, looking at those graduate learning competency targets, and identifying those statements. The last step to that then is to tie it to our curricular areas, like what does it look like if you're innovating in the area of critical and creative thinker? And where does that lie naturally in our teaching and learning in the different subject areas? So ultimately, when we're done, we should have a comprehensive resource that really outlines just those steps that we're going to take from kindergarten through 12th grade to be able to make sure we're instilling these and students are able to leave as a graduate with those characteristics. Those being embedded within the work they're already doing in curriculum really solidifies that academic, non-academic, those people call them soft skills, really they're work skills, right? All together for really that complete package when students leave. So some of our conversation has been around, artificial intelligence and how does that impact education, right? These characteristics, they're going to be around forever, right? They're things we want our students to know and be able to do. So as we start to go down that road and identify how critical these are, we're just really excited about the work and where we're headed. So this is one piece of our puzzle, but certainly ties into the work for innovative programming in schools that we've been pushing to see how do we develop that innovative nature within our schools. So really excited about the work. The principals are doing a great job starting to identify some of these pieces, and we look forward to the final product to present to you.
What's your time frame for that?
Well, I think the time frame was March. So March to have that comprehensive overview of things together, and then knowing that as we go through this, there may be some modifications that happen, but we think we'll be set in March. When was the date? Do you say?
March, our board meeting is when we hope to have the board officially adopt the Portrait of a Graduate.
Yeah. So characteristics are identified, those statements underneath those characteristics, and this is the deeper work that's happening within the buildings.
All right, so 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Excited.
2 weeks.
And I've seen in the buildings, we've already got
I'm sorry, the committee meetings of March.
Oh, okay, so in about a month, okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it'll come back here.
Correct.
Okay, not the main.
You're talking about the high-level Portrait of a Graduate, the one-page
Yes.
graphic?
That is
Okay, because I thought I've seen that
You have
already
seen it.
printed
Yeah.
in buildings.
We've just never officially adopted it as a board,
Okay.
but we want to have the board officially adopt it.
What if we don't like it?
Then
We have
we
to
would
take
change
down
it.
all those
Then we
those
would.
signs?
We would have to take down.
And reprint. Yeah, print a whole bunch of stickers to overlay.
I don't know that
Overwrite.
anything was printed with Portrait of the Graduate on it, but there
Yeah,
are
there
digital.
might be- I've seen a
Whoops,
few.
there are
I have
digital,
seen a
some
few.
digital some out there.
I have seen a few, so that's why we want to officially adopt it.
Gotcha.
It's a lot to think about. And actually, it's life skills, not just work skills.
Correct.
That's right. Yeah.
And different people present in different ways. So what you think is that in one individual may not look like it is similarly in another individual, depending.
There are many different ways you can demonstrate the same
Skill,
ICANN statement.
yeah.
Has there been any evidence-based research to show that having a portrait of a graduate like this has really had an impact on
Yes,
students?
there's a group called Battelle for Kids that has done a lot of work in that research to show that, they've been able to have kids generally more, when they have to do, critical job skills and they do surveys of postgraduates and those elements, the ones that have been able to work in a group and do some of these elements.
Yeah.
And measure it, from that standpoint of a lot more success in postgraduate, career and college readiness.
Right. No, that I absolutely believe. I just meant having a district develop this and publicize it in buildings as you are.
Well,
That impact.
I think the part is that it's getting back to that idea of, learning is not just content. When that kid crosses that stage and gets that handshake of a diploma, we want to be able to say, here are the things, that they're able, skills and dispositions, they're able to demonstrate the ability to do.
Right.
And be able to put a certification, if you will, on that. Just like we give a grade for, this about math, this about science, you also know how to apply these things in that given field that you're choosing to move forward, whether that's career right after school, college, whatever that is, trade school. That's the key part to it.
And there's some work that Tony Wagner's, he's written quite a few books and done a lot of research. He's at Harvard and talks about how, we used to be such a knowledge-based society. And with the shift to technology and AI, how that's all coming into play now more than any other time before. So you used to be able to be successful by being very academic and a coin stacker, like I can get an A or I can get a B. And now it's not only about the knowledge, that people have easy access to the knowledge, but how you can actually develop these skills.
And apply it.
Yeah.
I could see how you could get a much more self-confident individual. But I think it's going to be a very difficult thing to actually measure,
It is hard.
Yes.
But there are,
if not impossible.
I've seen, I've seen some really nice work with rubrics that teachers embed into their work, where kids are actually graded on these components as a part of projects and those things that they do.
And it's interesting too, because we do have quite a few little spots where we have some project-based learning happening, and they're referencing these all the time in those competencies, as they go through their projects. So, I think there's some places that for sure naturally fit, and I think that's why we do that identification of like, where does it naturally fit grade level wise for those ICANN statements or those competencies, and then also where does it fit subject wise? Like, where do you see those natural things? I mean, think about how many different ways in science and other classes you're doing problem solving and team collaboration, but it's about being intentional about the process that you're using and the skill you're trying to teach.
So what would you say the status of implementation is right now, like, to operationalize this? Like, have the,
Still early.
Early.
Okay,
I would say early, like if right now we're at where the principals are working within their principal meetings to identify these. The idea is that they also take it to their leadership teams and get feedback on it. And then that last layer is that curriculum layer, as how does it embed into those curricular pieces. So there's still a lot of work to do, but we have good momentum on this, and certainly just the identification of the portrait of the graduate competency is helpful. I know that, I think at West Senior High, they're already celebrating students if they see them actually exhibiting some of these characteristics of portrait of the graduate. So gaining some momentum, but it's not gonna happen overnight.
And,
It's good work.
and there's been a lot of work the team has been doing too, and what does this look like for a third grader versus an
Yep.
eighth grader versus an 11th grader?
Yep.
you know, in that aspect as well. And Beth, getting to your point of hard to measure, you're right. I think that it's able to be measured, but much more of a competent or not versus an A, B, C, D, or, you know, in that element.
Yeah, it makes me think of when I was in grade school, which was a long time ago, where they did this little thing where you got your letter grade, but then you also were graded on basically attitudinal sorts of things, so that you could flunk attitude, but do very well in math. I guess my other concern is if you recognize, generally the kids that win heavy on the attitude win frequently on attitude, and other kids almost say, well, I don't really, so I get a little bit further distant from it. You know, kind of what I'm saying. You almost feel like you've divided yourself out from the group. And because not everybody can be recognized without it seeming like it's humdrum. So it seems to me like it could be a difficult thing. I mean, it's great in theory, but humans a lot of times make things very different
And
in
different's
application.
okay. Different's okay, but still being able to demonstrate a competency. You know, there are very, very few career paths where if you can't collaborate with others, that you're going to be successful. Now, how you are a collaborator on that team may be very different from one team member to the other. And that's what you have to recognize. It's not a singular, it only looks like this. And that's the hard part, is start defining for a teacher to go, okay, as a team member, you can demonstrate it this way, or this way. You know, it's good. It kind of goes back to, I used to say all the time, I heard a speaker talk about whether, you know, which student is the best. If you had a student that scored a perfect SAT score, if you had a student that was an unbelievable dancer and was early admitted into the Juilliard School of Dance, or a student that was a welder and created an amazing art component that won the Grand Rapids Art Prize. Which one of the three is the smartest?
I think it would be a moot question.
Exactly. And so, but all three demonstrated their ability in amazing ways and to move forward in that way. And so I think this is in that same way. You have to be able to measure in multiple ways to be able to have a student demonstrate proficiency in that area. And that's hard work. And it's going to take us a long time getting there, but we're starting in an element, and we'll continue to build and see how that goes.
And identifying that these are important for our students to have, I think definitely is a step in the right direction. Just to, you know, to highlight that. It is really important that they leave us with not only the academic skills, but these skills as well.
Critical skills and dispositions.
Yeah.
I've seen similar models in other schools, what I would call progressive schools, work very well. And actually, you are able to see them work. It's pretty amazing, actually, because kids will hold each other to that standard as well. If it's ingrained in the curriculum, for example, you know, being a good citizen, that's one I've seen some schools use locally. And it's incorporated in all of the younger years. So the kids know by the time they got to middle school, they know exactly what it is, and they hold each other to it, which is pretty amazing.
But defining, that's, you know, that's the hardest piece.
Yeah, yep.
We're going to take a real crack at that and see what we can do.
So I have one last quick question. At what point do you envision all the teachers getting the training on this, if you will, or, you know, just being debriefed? And
That's a great question, and that actually is sitting on our professional learning team committee right now, figuring out, like, as we lay out that 3-year plan for training and adoption of things like this, like, where does that lay out in the plan, right? Because you want to make sure, number one, we don't fill up their plates so full that they don't have time to actually digest and do the good work to implement with fidelity, and then to figure out the other things that we have in place. So that's actually, Kirsten and I help lead the team for professional learning, and that's actually what we're working on. What are the initiatives that we have coming on? How do they tie to the strategic plan? And then what does it look like for implementation? So one of the key things we keep focusing on our team is implementation. How are we making sure we have an implementation plan that's paced appropriately So it's not another thing to teachers. So I can't give you an exact answer on that, but we do have a team looking to identify like what that pacing plan would look like.
Gotcha, thank you.
It sounds more like a cultural thing, as much as an itemized list for the teachers. No? Yes?
I get, when you're talking about professional learning. So professional learning, we actually have had quite a few conversations about how are we strategically planning when teachers are getting their training and what their training is on. So our goal is to have, like, for example, if you're a first-year teacher, what are those things you're being trained on? You know, and what professional learning opportunities take place. So there's lots of pieces of the puzzle to figure out, like, when you onboard new people, when do they get this training? So I would say it's just, we have to look strategically just at the planning process and implementation. So it is a little bit of a project management planning thing, but you also have to make sure you're embedding those and putting those in at the right time so we're not overwhelming teachers. So it will be a slow roll, and we've known that all along, even though we would love it to be faster, but we also, you know, want to make sure it's done well. So.
Okay. And then, coming back, I think, to Kristen. Are we,
Heidi's
we're
gonna-
going back
purchase,
to
yep,
Heidi?
Yep, just a curriculum overview.
Okay.
And
on
purchases,
B.
yep.
Yep, so one of the things we like to do, especially since we have new members on the team, is just to talk about what the curriculum purchase timeline in mapping looks like. So I have linked in this document for you to be able to see kind of how we map out by subject area, when implementations have started, when they're phasing out, and then what our next steps are. Yeah, you can probably zoom out a little bit on that. And so when you see the red, it means we have an adoption ending, and there's going to be something additional that's happening after that. And we try to pace, you'll see that there's all different ending points for depending on what subject it is and what course it is. So we've tried to do pacing so we're not having all our purchases happen in 1 year. And so with ESSER funds, you know, we've been able to advance some of our purchasing. And so again, it's still a planning process to make sure we are able to do the next purchases coming down the pipe. So if you go back to the other slide, we have the adoption process. So usually there's questions from new committee members on, do you have a process for adopting curriculum? So this is the established process that we use to adopt curriculum and the different steps that we go through depending on whenever we go through a curriculum adoption. So you'll see we prepare, we define the process. We also look to, is it a full-scale adoption, K-12? Is it just a single subject area? But you'll see the different, it keeps scrolling down, Meg. And then there's a study, when you study or pilot the curriculum that you're using. So we have a defined process of what we used when we're looking at the curriculum. Right now, I have an example for you because we're going through the physiology and anatomy single course adoption. So if you go back to the document and click on the sample rubric, this is some of the intentional work that happens when you're actually reviewing something from a vendor. And this was from our Elevate, when we were looking at Elevate. But if you scroll down, Megan, to I think it's page 3, this is our adoption and it's aligned to the EQUIP rubric. So for science, it's very specific to make sure we're aligned with our NGSS science standards, which is next generation science standards. And then as you go through, there's some things that are really important for us to make sure our teachers are doing. So in science, when we use the EQUIP rubric, we're looking for, are they using project-based learning? And what does that look like? And what does scaffolding look like? So if you scroll down a couple more pages, keep going, there you go. So this is where we actually dig into the resource that we might be using for adoption and align to make sure it actually meets the requirements with NGSS and those elements that we know we want to use as science. Then in that third column there, you'll see we have evidence of quality, and did it meet it? Was it inadequate? Was it adequate? And how do we actually rank that? And then if there was a gap, do we have suggestions for improvement? And so whenever we take people through an adoption, whether it's math, science, social studies, we not only look at what that process looks like, but also align it to a rubric that aligns to our Michigan state standards, and then identify if we feel like it's adequate, you know, if it's a great product, if it's not adequate, and then go on from there. So this was an example of one for Inspire when we were looking at science, but everything we do for sure is aligned to a rubric. So when we typically look at 2 to 3 vendors. We pick the top 3 and then align our work to this. So right now, the anatomy and physiology group, they have narrowed it down to 2 books as we speak right now. And they are finishing the EQUIP rubrics on them to make sure that we have identification of what that high quality material and resource is for them. Anatomy and physiology is a 1-course adoption. And that was tackled because we have one adoption in 2001 at Central and the other one in 2009. So they're on different editions and some are 20 years old. So ESSER has allowed us to actually get this adoption in place for the anatomy and physiology teachers. So you'll hear more about that coming up. So you'll have an opportunity to look through just the process that we use for curriculum adoption, an example of a rubric that we might align to, as well as like our pacing map of the adoption guide of when things will happen as we go through to try to secure that we're not having everything come up into the same adoption year with lots of requests and no dollars to support. And if you want to go back, Megan. Any questions?
First, I just want to say,
Yeah.
I absolutely love the graphic.
Oh, you're
Thank
welcome.
you, this is very
Yes,
helpful,
yeah.
Heidi. And
We have our red alerts on there, so we know when we're.
I don't think I've seen it laid out like this before, so I really like it.
Yeah.
And so the red cells, like right now, we're at the end of the pilot of the math
Yes.
for elementary
Yep.
schools. So the red cell,
The red cell is in, and so Jesse's doing that pilot right now with math. So, between Into Math and Math Expressions. So that's one that's in the queue, and you'll hear a little bit more from Kirsten about the ELA adoption that's coming up. You'll see that 6 through 12. My perspectives of what they're using right now, but she'll elaborate on that in a little bit here.
and you probably just can't fit it on this one page, but you've got something for
Yes.
social science.
There's more.
Social studies
Yes,
history.
Yes, yeah.
All the subjects.
Yep, everything's on there, with when the last adoption was, and there's even a deeper one. If you see up in the far left corner, there's a little,
Yeah.
we have an internal document that actually outlines, if something is in progress, because we have we need to make sure we loop in the business department and what happened, so what those processes look like, and when the last time the adoption occurred, what the cost was, so we can kind of guesstimate what it might be for the next adoption. So when we're planning forward on the financial side, we know we've budgeted at least close to what we think it might be.
Do you by chance have the foreign languages handy that you can show us? I asked just because
Can you open
haven't-
that and see if I have that one? I thought I did have it on there. I can't imagine I wouldn't. Maybe not. Scroll down.
I don't, I
There
just,
it is.
I asked because
There
I
it
don't
is. Okay.
recall
Yep.
purchases on world languages.
Yep, so there's world languages, and then if you scroll to the right, you'll see what that process was. And okay, so we purchased Anchor Text actually for them last year. So the update for Anchor Text won't occur until 28, 29.
And what does that mean, anchor text?
So those are books that they select that students are able to read, actually reading, small, they call them anchor text.
Instead of being
yeah.
on their computers and
Instead of a world language book where we're talking about grammar, it's those little stories.
Okay.
So, so we did some work with world language last year and the year before to help update them on their anchor text.
So that's actually reading literature in the
Yes.
foreign language?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So it's like 2nd year, 3rd year German?
Yes, we did actually,
yes.
German was in the adoption too. Yep.
Yeah.
And then if you want to go back to, then we have, if you go to the next slide, we have what's coming next on adoption. So, do you want to talk a little bit about
Sure.
the ELA?
Yep. So, as you could see on the map, our 6th through, it's actually 11th grade language arts curriculum is using my perspectives, and our contract with them actually runs out this year, at the end of this year. So the ELA department leaders have been working hard at determining what our next steps are. So just like Heidi outlined in the adoption process, we have been reviewing certainly the product, my perspectives in general. And you utilize a variety of resources, Ed Reports being one of them. There are a number of different tools that you can look at to measure the effectiveness of a particular program. And then you vet that against what your district has established are the priorities that you want as a learner and also for the teacher. So we're in the middle of that process, really beginning to kind of have, I would say, a clear direction, particularly as it relates to our high school. Our middle school is still really, I would say, in the process of determining what they would recommend to the board moving forward. So I anticipate coming to you within the next few months with that recommendation from that team. But our purpose today was really to show you what the background work looks like so that you know that when we've come to you with that recommendation, you can be assured that all of those steps have been in play, and that the recommendation has been fully vetted through the instructional leadership team.
Yep, and then we have anatomy and physiology, which you heard a little bit about. And we'll have the elementary math recommendation coming forward, and those will be in the May board curriculum meeting.
Would I be able to spend a little bit of time with you and look at the anatomy and physiology so I could just see, using that as an example, how you kind of step through some of this?
Yeah, you're more than welcome. We have, I'm trying to think of, I have to see if I have an additional resource book for review. I'll check and see if I have an extra.
Okay, so it's sort of like how you're looking at it. I
Yep.
know how I look at it.
Yep, they review the book, they look at the chapters, and if you notice in that rubric, it outlines what does it look like thematically, what does it look like by unit, and are we meeting those targets related to NGSS and those problem-based, place-based learning and engineering, how they tie to engineering practices.
And how deep are they trying to go in what period
Yes,
of time?
yep. And one of our focuses is to make sure we're prepped, because we're told that in 2 years, they may offer AP anatomy and physiology as an option. And so when we prep, we're also talking to the AP people to make sure when we make our book selection, that we won't have to do another book selection when they go to adapt for, and make AP anatomy and physiology available, just in case.
College Board literally announced that at an event we were at.
Yeah.
Just here in Grand Rapids, at a school district, they were there. So that's a couple years away, but, so that's.
So we're
pretty
trying
big.
to, yep,
With or without a lab?
with or without.
Without a lab. A lab going with the,
Oh, yeah, no, they would have their
Definitely
labs, yep.
embedded, Yeah, embedded within the course.
Yep. Yep, that's actually part of the adoption process. We not only talk about those textbook or online digital resources, but like if you're doing authentic learning, what does that look like and what tools do you need? And what you're relating to, I assume, is just like those lab-based things that they're going to need to perform
right,
some of those.
because
Yep.
it's going to be the bridge to application,
Yep, yes,
is what a lab is.
yep. The best part. All right, if there aren't any questions
At this time.
at this time, okay?
Okay, now I defer.
No,
to
I'm
you,
actually
Kristen.
turning over to Kirsten. I was gonna punt for her because I didn't know she'd be back from vacation with the weather, but she's back.
I
And she
am.
will be able to give you a more detailed overview, so.
Yeah, so I'd like to take some time and just update you all on our instructional coaches. This has been a new initiative in the district. And really came to fruition beginning in the springtime of last year. So Dr. Van Wagner came to principals and said, we're really thinking about developing a coaching model. That was met with resounding enthusiasm. Coaching is really a proven, research-based way in which to embed professional learning into the daily practice of educators. And so that has been a really exciting thing to have within the district. So at this time, there are 13, that FTE stands for full-time employees that are coaches. However, the allocation of those resources looks a little different depending on the building itself. So the building had some discretion in determining how they might want to utilize their full-time FTE. For example, West Middle School chose to take 1 point FTE and divide that position to 4 teachers that were specific to the content area. So he took his .2 coach and made an ELA coach, a math coach, a science coach, and a social studies coach. Different than, say, East Middle School, who chose to take their FTE and make it 1 person. So each building had the discretion to decide how they thought they might best utilize that FTE. But overall, we have 13 across the district. All of them have been extensively trained throughout this year. And so one of the most important approaches that we took was we want to pour resources into these teachers so that they in turn can then utilize those skills with the teaching staff. So you'll see a number of trainings that have been experienced by or are currently being experienced by our coaching team. Restorative practices, essentials in literacy, science of reading, explicit instruction, cognitive coaching, and no more random acts of coaching. Those last 2 have really been the anchor for how we have approached utilizing coaching within the buildings. So while the allocation of FTE might be different in each building dependent on the decision made by the principal, the execution of coaching itself is consistent across the district, meaning everyone who's engaging in the coaching process is using the same approach and technique and coaching cycle.
Okay, can I ask a question back on?
Of course,
Don't let me interrupt your flow.
it's all right.
I'm just a member of the community. And so when you hire these FTEs, these are people that are already trained teachers.
These are members of our
Alright.
current
Generally,
teaching
to be
staff.
honest with you, some of our best of our best.
So people already here on staff.
Correct.
Okay. And then when you say restorative practices, what does that mean?
So restorative practices is an approach that is actually something that our entire district has been invested in. And it's really a way in which to train children, to teach children how they go about making amends when perhaps there has been some kind of conflict that has occurred. And so it is really teaching some of those interpersonal and intrapersonal skills for our students. It's providing them an opportunity to reflect on what it is that he or she might have done, how they might think about doing things differently, what the impact of that decision was. And so restorative practices is really largely used as a way to respond and help kids shape into more pro-social behavior.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. So if there was a conflict that, let's say, kids are on social media and they are slandering, one person slandering someone else on Facebook, right? And it spills over into the school day, and now there's a conflict and it's impacting kids' ability to even go into the classroom. I'm not gonna go in there because she's in there and she was saying this about me on Facebook. A restorative conversation would be to talk to both students involved. And you really, at that point, are trying to help the person that has actually done the harm take some ownership and responsibility for that and to make amends. Like, how did that impact that person? What do you think you're gonna have to do to make this right? So it's a way of engaging kids and being able to resolve conflicts. It's also an alternative to some of our more traditional consequence systems, and it's something that the state is actually saying that we must consider. Have we used restorative practices with kids prior to suspending them from school even? So it's a process, and it's really a mindset that says, we're kind of to the point of the portrait of graduate. We know that there is a whole lot more to educating children than just simply teaching content. It is also every single day on every single playground, helping them resolve conflicts in a way that is satisfying to both parties. It is also helping when we blow it to figure out how we can own that and make amends for that. And it's also a way to help kids be able to move forward.
What happens if the kid doesn't see the need to amend his behavior according to the guidelines and expectations of the person holding them accountable?
Well, you can imagine that that does happen, right? That it is actually
Could imagine that.
very challenging for any of us to really stop and own when we've blown it with somebody else, right? So the process isn't, these are still human beings, and it's still about when you are attempting to develop a sense of empathy, oftentimes that is something that takes repeated practice. And so in the exact same way that we say to kids, you have to have repeated practice to be able to solve linear equations, we know that this is ongoing work. And so sometimes that happens in the most beautiful of ways, and you see that true kind of owning of, boy, that really did hurt somebody else. And sometimes I would say that that's something that we come back to a lot. And so these are ways in which you approach kids to help them frame their own thinking about how they're impacting the others in their environment.
I could see it as a behavior modification that's a gentle one, but I don't see it as a linear equation.
Yeah, it is. I would say it's not. I guess my point is that simply you are consistently with restorative practice, just like you are with academic skills. That is something that has to be revisited over and over again because it is learned. It is something that takes some time and is further developed in some kids than it is in others.
And it's also about building community. Like, how are you, like, they have restorative practice circles where you're actually just working to build that belonging and sense of community within a classroom, within your staff. You have, principals use it with their staff too. So it's really about making sure we have connections with our students, with our staff, with everyone in our building to help build a culture, that positive culture in the building. And this is one way to do it, If you feel like you're a part of a community and you're embedded in that community, how do we make sure everybody's getting what they need, as well as addressing issues when they come up in a way that helps nurture growth versus be punitive all the time?
Okay, and I will tell you, if you haven't seen West Senior High, having been there the past few years, they do a phenomenal training with their students. So usually when there's conflict between two students, then they have two students who are fostering that conversation and really leading the mediation between those two individuals. And I've seen it happen, and the outcome is pretty phenomenal. So kudos to Jen Miner and her team.
And then essentials in literacy.
Essentials in literacy were established by the state of Michigan. Those are really kind of the fundamental core components that need to be present in our classrooms to develop literacy in our skills, in our students.
Okay, so it's going back to teaching reading.
Correct. Both essentials in literacy, although there is also an essentials in math. It's not quite as developed at the state level. And then the science of reading, is really, again, focusing on training that is specific to everything we know currently based on science that is best practice in helping develop literate students. So it is a heavily research, evidence-based approach to teaching literacy instruction for our youngest readers.
Okay, and then explicit instruction. These are all,
Sure, absolutely. Explicit
my-
instruction is a specific type of pedagogy, and it's really just that idea that you are, it's specific to new content. So when you are working with kids on something that is completely unfamiliar to them, you are going to use a gradual release model to teach kids that specific skill, process, or strategy. So you might hear that phrase, I do, and then we do, and then you do, which is that gradual release model where the teacher in the I do is modeling exactly what the process, procedure, strategy is. The we do is the teacher and the students doing it together collaboratively. And then the you do is when the student has to then independently practice the skill without support. This sounds incredibly simple. It's actually quite challenging, and it requires a lot of thought and deliberation and planning on the part of the educator. So explicit instruction is just a series of instructional strategies that are specific to teaching new content.
okay. Cognitive coaching.
Cognitive coaching and no more random acts of coaching are really based on how we wanted our coaches to approach the coaching cycle. So cognitive coaching really, in essence, is working as a collaborator and a thinking partner with your teaching colleague. And so cognitive coaching teaches our coaches how to ask a series of questions to their teaching colleagues that's intended to help them clarify their thinking, set goals, develop a plan, and reflect on that plan.
Sort of a mentor?
Yes, I hesitate to use the word mentor. I would say it's more of a thinking collaborator. So the premise of cognitive coaching really is that the teacher is an expert, that the teacher holds knowledge and expertise. The coach's role is really to ask through a series of questions a way in which to help that teacher clarify their own thinking, set goals. They might help provide resources and develop a plan, and then they provide some reflection. How did that go? So both No More Random Acts of Coaching and cognitive coaching are really helping our coaches understand what their role is. They don't have to be the smartest person in the room. What their job is to help clarify the thinking of their teaching colleague, to provide resources, to perhaps collaborate on planning.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So to date, we've had 1,780 contacts, which has been, equates to 1,246 hours of coaching contact. Most of that support has been provided at an individual teacher level, but you'll see the breakdown there that some has been provided by our coaches to grade level teams, some is through full staff, some is through small group, which might be a collection of teachers that are not necessarily the same grade, but might be the same content. So the coach might be working with all ELA teachers. Parapros, and then SSW stands for School Social Work. And you'll see that primarily the content of focus has been ELA, with some of SEL, which is that social and emotional learning or behavior, math, social studies, and science. So we've just conducted an initial impact survey with staff. So we've had about 101 teachers respond so far, and just tried to keep it really simple. I have felt coaching has had a direct positive impact on my work as a teacher. 67% of our teachers that responded to this survey agreed or strongly agreed with that statement. And then the idea that coaching has had a positive impact on our work on building and/or district initiatives, you'll see that that was just slightly higher at 73% agree or strongly agree. And I just included, and you can look at this at your, on your time, but certainly there have been some really profound comments that I have been reading as these surveys have come in. I included the top one. This was a veteran teacher of 17 years. So one thing we want to make clear is that coaching benefits everyone. When we started the year, I said to staff, LeBron James has a coach, right? The greatest basketball player now has a coach. So coaching really is something that has impact for all, not just our new teachers. And then I also wanted to just look at the impact that it's having with our administrators. So compared to other district initiatives, coaching has had a significant impact on the overall instructional practice in the building. 92% agreed or strongly agreed. And then this last piece speaks to all of that training that those coaches received. We wanted to know, are they actually utilizing that PD in their practice with teaching staff? And actually 100% of principals responded that they strongly agreed. So all of that training that we just were going through, they're seeing put into practice on a daily basis with their teaching staff. And then I just included a couple of quotes for you to look at as well.
So I apologize if you already addressed this, but when do they have time to work with the coaches? Is it like the early release days or
So
a free
the
period?
cycle exists. The cycle is, it can be about a 4 to 6 week cycle, and the intent is that you will meet. Our hope is that every teacher has the opportunity to experience one coaching cycle this year. Some have requested to remain on all year. And depending again on how much allocation the coach has, they might be taking on 4 to 5 teachers per cycle. So some might have as many as 10 per cycle because they're full-time. The teacher then is committing to using one of those planning periods that they get during their day to collaborate and plan with the coach. So that over the course of a year, a teacher might have 4 to 6 of those planning contacts, depending on if they're participating in the cycle once. If they choose to participate more, then it would happen obviously on a more regular basis. So usually it's, when you're in the cycle, it's once a week during one of the planning periods.
Great, thank you.
And is this a long-term, do you see this like fiscal year to fiscal year, or?
That is the goal, but it is a commitment. It's about a $1.3 million commitment for the district. But we believe there's a comment that I say all the time that we really want to maintain being a school district and in a district of schools. So this is a way for us to ensure that we're getting consistent training, consistent movement, initiatives. If we look at, for instance, explicit instruction, if you look at somewhat the gold standard of looking at instructional strategies that have the most impact with literal science and impact number given to it, John Hattie's work, explicit instruction, is one of those top 10 things that you get the most bang for your buck doing. But that's something we need to have teachers be able to learn how to do. And so somehow we have to have people that can go into our buildings and do that. And so having this coaching model is a way for us to have our principals and our coaches be able to learn that concept and be able to directly take that as a teach-the-teacher model in our buildings. And we were able to consistently do that in every single elementary building this year to start that work. Next year, it's more of a full implementation to be able to do that. So when we really want to get laser focused on the things that we want to do, that science tells us impacts instruction the most, we need a team of folks to be able to go and do that. And this is our team to do that with consistency and laser-like focus across the district.
Do you have any concerns that your coaches may get burned out?
Sure, but we have concerns about every employee in the district now. Our bus drivers, our food
Sure,
service folks,
sure.
that's unfortunately what it's about working in the school right now, of what that is. I worry about board members, that element. So, that's always a concern. But we know we've given some capacity to some people to do that and not do that even again on top of teaching all day and trying to maybe help do that, or a principal to try and do that when they have every other thing going on, including the behavior issues we've had. We've been able to put a resource in that building that's what they focus on. I'd honestly like for them to all be full-time. We've had some buildings that are smaller that have had some splits and some things that they felt they needed to have the person only be half-time. I think there's a couple that might even reevaluate this year. But for the most part, having at least somebody at least half-time in that building that's helping to lead that charge, to have somebody that a teacher professionally can reflect with, that's not evaluating them. There's not a threat of that, to truly give thought of political practice, we think is very powerful. Research shows it's powerful. And so our intent is to be able to keep this and have this in place long-term. But is it a budget element? It is, but we're really, really committed to try and make this a component of what we do because we think it matters that much.
So it's sort of like a peer support model on steroids.
Very much so. You've got it with a large infusion of strong training, very narrow and specific to those people to work with their building administrator to bring that across the teachers in their building.
Okay, thank you.
We did survey them as well. I didn't include that, but the coaches themselves, and I would say that overwhelmingly, they are feeling tremendously supported, and very excited for the role. And for many of them, this was a sort of rejuvenating experience for them. They're very skilled teachers. They're doing really important work, and I think they're beginning to see the payoff of their labor. So
And it just got started this year.
just started, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Oh, what a nice thing to provide coming out of the pandemic.
It's been important. I mean, when we talked about behaviors and, I will tell you an anecdote, and I'll tell you this is from a former district. But I remember, having a teacher come to me and say, I didn't sign up for this. I never was trained on how to deal with some of the behaviors and some of the traumatic things some of our kids, especially our kids in low income and very tough situations. I was never trained on that. I don't know how to do this. What am I supposed to do? And so so we have an obligation, in my opinion, to give them the professional tools that they need to be able to work with these kids and deal with all these other elements to make sure they still can achieve. If you can't solve if a kid's hungry and coming to school, if we can't give them food, they're not gonna learn. Well, often with some of these behaviors in that element, this was one of the key strategies we wanted to try and implement to get the coaches some training on behaviors, a strong positive behavior system in every building that they could work with the teachers and the building principal to implement. And so our goal was to get them trained on that this year with a full implementation for the building administrator with the coach to have that for this next year. And so we really think it's an important piece to many of the things coming out of the pandemic of the behaviors and trauma that we have seen.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask from a budget perspective, are there any categoricals out there or grants that we can apply for to help with this?
No, I mean, the ISD gets a little bit of money for the literacy elements, and what they do is they hire people to work with our people, for that. But really, there's not been anything that really gives that, from that standpoint. And it's an investment that many, many districts have just started to make across, because, there used to be a time, I think it was really expected for a building principal to be able to manage the building and be the instructional leader completely of that building, and to be able to do all that, but adding on all the teacher evaluation components that they've put in the law, you know, of a specific, you know, 27 components, I think, of the Marzano rubric, all these other things, along with, oh, by the way, the behaviors they're dealing with having, with the kids and all that, to ask a principal to solely be the only person, many times the only person in their building to be able to do that, and give the attention of maybe that newer teacher or that, again, that teacher I talked about that came and said, I was never trained how to do this, to have that expectation to by themselves to be able to do that, in my opinion, is pretty impossible. And so, you know, that's just a commitment with the dollars that you have. If you're going to be true about increasing student achievement and about trying to manage behaviors and give tools, teachers tools in their toolbox, I truly believe this is one of the only strategies that has real power to be able to do that. But it's hard. I wish there were categoricals, and I wish there were grants, and if there were, we would apply for them immediately.
And approximately, what's your coach to teacher ratio?
That depends on the building itself. Again,
It
everyone
varies.
was, it's varying quite a bit this year because I think it was new, it was new to principals as well. So we have as much as, or as little as a 1 to 18 ratio, or we have an East Middle School, which has one coach that is servicing, how many staff would be at like East Middle School would probably be 40. And so then it's really about strategizing with staff about who's going to be able to have the coaching experience and what they're going to focus on. And so that's again been decided at that building level. At the district level, we wanted to make sure that coaches were well trained, had a consistent model, and we're able to push out some of that professional development that we know is best delivered when it's colleague to colleague and it's in a safe place where they can practice those skills.
Like many things in our district, because of 275 square miles, you know, you're going to have some elements of, you know, equity of the size of a building, but yet you can't just have them, okay, 20 minutes, can you be over on the other side of, you know, of the county? And so, you know, like so many things, we do have some that have more and some that have less. And the one thing we wanted to make sure is at least everybody had access to some. Would I love to have resources for more and be able to give our larger buildings maybe 1.5 or 2? Would love to. But, you know, this was our first step, and this is a heck of an investment right here that we're going to try and hang on to. But, you know, unfortunately, I don't see anything that gives us the resources to increase that from that element.
I understand.
Would do so if we could, though.
I hear you. I hear you. Thank you.
All right, I get to highlight the celebrations that are happening around the district. So in honor of Engineering Week, I just wanted to say shout out to the students who are challenging themselves in engineering, STEM, and technology classes. We have 2 professional engineers on staff, and along with other STEM, excellent STEM staff, they are really supporting the growth of that next generation of engineers in our district. So you're refreshing, okay. Yeah, thank you. Next we have, who's the clicker? You?
There we go.
Oh, okay. Heidi?
Yeah, you're good.
Next, just want to shout out to both of the high schools who really took time to honor the victims of the Michigan State shooting last week, either by showing support by wearing green and white or MSU gear, and also fundraising. And then there was a special tribute during last week's CHS Orchestra Winter Expressions concert.
The strings group played the alma mater.
Oh, they did, yeah.
As their last presentation, so pretty cool.
Really powerful. Next, we want to shout out to some West Middle School artists. So Finn and Nora were part of the Michigan Art Education's K-12 state exhibit. And exciting, over 500 pieces of artwork. Finn was in the top 100 and Nora was chosen in the top 18.
Wow.
And those will be displayed at the Ann Arbor Public Library this spring. I would encourage you, a lot of these shout outs are on our Facebook page. There are some photos, more detail of some of that work. Kind of exciting. And finally, just thanks to the Silver Lake PTO and Mr. Van Houten for leading a family event in winter painting. They had a winter painting event for upper elementary students and their families. Also to Traverse City Central High School, there were 2 classes that visited the Reigning Liberty Ranch. That is the therapeutic horse Ranch, as you know, and much of that partnership focuses on helping students with anxiety, anger management, animal therapy, craft, nature walks, et cetera. So I'm really excited about the work that was there. And again, many of those pictures can be seen on our TCAPS Facebook page. And we have shout outs every Friday, right? Yeah.
Every Friday,
yeah.
every Friday.
Every Friday. Very good. With that, we'll conclude what we have for you, unless you have questions for us.
Any other items to come before the committee? That being said, I believe I can adjourn.
Okay.
Go and enjoy the snow.